The silence at our Christmas dinner table was so thick I could barely breathe. I sat frozen in my chair, my left arm throbbing where Robert's fingers had just dug into my flesh like iron claws. The red marks were already turning purple, blooming across my pale skin like ugly flowers that everyone could see. Robert's mother, Patricia, stared with her mouth slightly open, her fork halfway to her lips. Thomas, Robert's police officer brother, had gone completely still, his eyes fixed on my bruised arm. His wife, Jessica, was already reaching for her napkin, her nurse instincts kicking in. Even Amy, Robert's spoiled younger sister, had stopped mid-chew, her eyes wide with shock. But it was my 8-year-old son Maxwell who broke the terrible silence. My little boy stood up slowly from his chair, his small hands gripping his tablet so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His dark eyes, so much like mine, looked directly at his father with a courage that seemed impossible for someone so young. "I recorded everything, Dad," Maxwell said, his voice clear and steady in the dead quiet room. Those 5 simple words hit Robert like a lightning bolt. All the color drained from his face, leaving him looking like he'd seen a ghost. His hand, which had been resting on the table, began to shake. The confident, controlling man who had just humiliated me in front of his entire family suddenly looked terrified. "What did you say?" Robert whispered, his voice barely audible. Maxwell held up his tablet, the screen glowing softly in the dim dining room light. "I said I recorded everything, not just today, everything. But let me take you back to how this perfect family Christmas dinner began, just a few hours earlier, when everything still looked normal from the outside. I had been awake since 5 in the morning, my stomach twisted in knots as I prepared for Robert's family to arrive. I moved quietly through our pristine kitchen, checking and double-checking every detail. The turkey had to be perfect. The table setting had to be flawless. My appearance had to be spotless. Because Robert's family expected nothing less than perfection, and Robert expected me to deliver it. "The cranberry sauce better not be too sweet this year," Robert had warned me while adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. "Mother complained about it last Christmas, remember?" I remembered. I remembered every criticism, every disappointed look, every way I had failed to meet the Bennett family standards over the past 10 years of marriage. "I used less sugar this time," I replied softly, smoothing down my green dress for the 100th time. I'd chosen green because Robert said it brought out my eyes, but now I worried it was too bright, too attention-seeking. "Good, and make sure Maxwell behaves himself. No tablet at the dinner table. I don't want Mother thinking we can't control our own son." I nodded, though I knew Maxwell was the least of our problems. My 8-year-old son was unusually well-behaved, almost too quiet sometimes. He spent most of his time reading or playing educational games on his tablet, staying out of everyone's way. "Claire!" Robert's voice had an edge to it that made me jump. The doorbell. "They're here." I rushed to answer it, pasting on my brightest smile as Patricia Bennett swept into our home like a queen inspecting her kingdom. Robert's mother was a tall, thin woman who always found something wrong with everything I did. "The wreath is crooked," Patricia announced before even saying hello. "I'll fix it right away," I replied, my heart already sinking. Thomas and Jessica arrived next, followed by Amy, who stumbled slightly and smelled like wine. Robert's jaw tightened at his sister's condition, but he said nothing. The Bennett family was very good at pretending everything was fine, even when it wasn't. As we all gathered in the dining room, I caught Maxwell watching from the doorway, his tablet clutched in his small hands. He'd been carrying it everywhere lately, saying he was working on a special project for school. I had no idea that my son's special project would be the thing that finally brought our carefully hidden truth into the light. The dinner was about to begin, and with it, the most important night of our lives. I met Robert Bennett on what I thought was the luckiest day of my life. I was 24, working at the downtown library, and he walked in looking for books about real estate investment. He was so handsome in his expensive suit, so confident and charming. When he asked me to help him find what he needed, I felt like the most special woman in the world. "You have beautiful eyes," he told me that first day, and I blushed so hard I could barely speak. For 6 months, Robert was everything I had ever dreamed of in a man. He brought me flowers every Friday. He took me to fancy restaurants I could never afford on my library salary. He told me I was perfect, that I was exactly what he'd been looking for his whole life. "You're so gentle and sweet, Claire," he would say, stroking my hair. "Not like those loud, demanding women I used to date. You understand what a real woman should be." I thought it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. The first time I met his family, I should have seen the warning signs. We went to Sunday dinner at Patricia's house, and I spent the entire meal feeling like I was taking a test I didn't know how to pass. "So you work at a library," Patricia said, making it sound like I cleaned sewers for a living. How quaint. "Claire loves books," Robert said, but even then I could hear something different in his voice, like he was making excuses for me. Thomas barely spoke to me that day, just nodded politely when Robert introduced us. Jessica seemed nice enough, but she kept giving me these strange looks, like she was trying to tell me something without words. Amy, who was only 15 then, rolled her eyes every time I spoke. "They just need time to get used to you," Robert assured me later. "My family is very close. They're protective of me." After we got married, things started changing slowly. So slowly that I didn't notice at first. Robert began correcting the way I dressed, the way I spoke, the way I arranged the furniture in our new house. "Honey, that dress makes you look a little cheap," he would say with a concerned smile. "I just want you to look your best. Maybe you shouldn't laugh so loud when we're out with my colleagues. It's a bit embarrassing. Do you really think you need to work at the library anymore? I make enough money for both of us. Wouldn't you rather focus on making our home perfect?" Each suggestion felt like love at the time. He cared about me so much that he wanted to help me become better. I quit my job. I changed my wardrobe. I learned to speak more quietly, to take up less space in the world. When Maxwell was born, I thought things would get better. Robert seemed so proud to have a son. But even then, he had very specific ideas about how our family should look. "Maxwell needs to learn discipline early," he would say when our baby cried. "We can't let him think he can control us with tears." As Maxwell grew older, I watched my little boy become quieter and quieter, just like I had. He learned to stay out of his father's way, to be perfect and invisible. It broke my heart, but I didn't know how to protect him without making things worse. Maxwell was incredibly smart, much smarter than other kids his age. He could read before he turned 4, and by the time he was 6, he was using my old laptop to learn about computers and technology. When Robert bought him a tablet for his 7th birthday, Maxwell became fascinated with it. "I'm making movies, Mommy," he told me one day, showing me how he could record videos with the tablet. "I can save them and watch them later." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, not thinking much about it. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked what kind of movies he was making. Over the past year, Robert's anger had been getting worse. The criticism became sharper. The demands became impossible to meet. And sometimes, when he was really frustrated with me, his hands would grip my arms a little too tight, leaving marks I had to cover with long sleeves. I told myself it wasn't that bad. I told myself all marriages had problems. I told myself I was lucky to have a husband who cared so much about our family being perfect. But deep down, I was starting to realize that perfect families don't leave bruises. Christmas morning started before dawn with the sound of Robert's alarm. I was already awake, staring at the ceiling and going over my mental checklist for the 100th time. Turkey in the oven by 8, table set by 9. Myself showered, dressed, and looking perfect by 10 when his family would arrive. "Today has to be flawless, Claire," Robert said as he got out of bed. "Mother is still upset about last year's disaster." Last year's disaster was the mashed potatoes being slightly lumpy. I had apologized for weeks. I slipped out of bed and headed to the kitchen, my stomach already churning with anxiety. Maxwell was still sleeping, and I envied him those last few peaceful moments before the storm arrived. The turkey went into the oven right on schedule. I set the dining room table with our best china, the wedding set that Patricia had picked out for us. Every fork had to be perfectly aligned, every glass spotless. I polished each piece twice. At exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. My heart jumped into my throat. Patricia swept through our front door like a winter storm, her sharp eyes immediately scanning everything for flaws. She was dressed in an expensive burgundy suit, her silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "The wreath is crooked," she announced before even removing her coat. "I'll fix it right away," I stammered, rushing to adjust it while she watched with disapproval. "And why does it smell like sage in here?" I specifically told Robert that I prefer traditional Christmas scents, pine or cinnamon. I thought sage would be nice with the turkey," I said weakly. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, it's too late to change it now, isn't it?" Robert appeared, all smiles and charm for his mother. "Mother, you look beautiful as always. Come in, come in." He shot me a warning look over her head. I was already failing, and the day had barely begun. Thomas and Jessica arrived 20 minutes later. Thomas looked tired, like he'd been working too many shifts, but he hugged his mother warmly and shook Robert's hand. Jessica gave me a small, sympathetic smile as she handed me a bottle of wine. "You look lovely, Claire," she said quietly. "That green dress is perfect on you." "Thank you," I whispered, grateful for even that small kindness. But Patricia overheard. "Green is such a bold choice for Christmas. I always think red or gold is more appropriate for the holidays." Jessica's smile faltered, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Amy arrived last, stumbling slightly as she came through the door. Her makeup was smudged, and she reeked of alcohol and cigarettes. At 25, she still acted like a teenager, and Robert's jaw tightened as he watched her nearly trip over the coffee table. "Amy, are you drunk?" he asked through gritted teeth. "It's Christmas, Bobby," she slurred, using the childhood nickname she knew he hated. "Lighten up." Patricia's face went white with fury. "Amy Bennett, you are a disgrace. How dare you show up to family dinner in this condition?" "Oh, please," Amy laughed, throwing herself onto our white sofa with her dirty boots still on. "Like this family doesn't have bigger problems than me having a few drinks." The tension in the room became suffocating. Robert's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Thomas stared at the floor. Jessica busied herself arranging the wine bottles I'd set out. That's when Maxwell appeared in the doorway, clutching his tablet against his chest. He was dressed in the nice button-down shirt and khakis I'd laid out for him, his dark hair neatly combed, but his eyes looked worried as he took in the scene. "Hi, Grandma Patricia," he said politely. "Hi, Uncle Thomas. Hi, Aunt Jessica. Hi, Aunt Amy." Patricia's expression softened slightly when she saw him. "Hello, Maxwell. My, you've grown since Thanksgiving." "Come give your grandmother a hug," Robert commanded, his voice still tight with anger at Amy. Maxwell obediently walked over and hugged Patricia, but I noticed he kept his tablet clutched in one hand the whole time. He'd been carrying it everywhere lately, always working on his mysterious school project. "What's that you have there?" Thomas asked, nodding at the tablet. "Just some games," Maxwell said quietly. "And videos." "Videos?" Jessica asked with interest. "What kind of videos?" Maxwell glanced at me, then at his father, his young face suddenly guarded. "Just family stuff." I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why my 8-year-old son looked so serious when he talked about his videos. But the timer for the turkey was beeping, and Patricia was already criticizing the way I'd arranged the appetizers, and I was too busy trying to keep everything perfect to pay attention to the warning signs. "Shall we sit down for dinner?" I announced with forced cheerfulness, my voice slightly shaky as I gestured toward the dining room. The table looked beautiful, I had to admit. The white tablecloth was spotless, the candles flickered warmly, and the good china gleamed under the chandelier. But as everyone took their seats, I felt like I was walking into a courtroom where I was already guilty. Patricia positioned herself at Robert's right side, the place of honor. Thomas and Jessica sat across from each other, while Amy slumped into her chair, still reeking of alcohol. Maxwell took his usual spot at the far end, his tablet resting quietly in his lap. "The turkey looks a bit dry," Patricia observed before I'd even finished carving it. My hands trembled slightly as I continued slicing. "I followed the recipe exactly, same one as last year." "Well, last year's turkey was dry too," she replied matter-of-factly. Robert's jaw tightened. I could feel his embarrassment radiating across the table like heat from a fire. "I'm sure it's delicious, Mother." Claire worked very hard on it. But his tone suggested he was already disappointed in me too. I served everyone their plates, my hands shaking more with each portion. The mashed potatoes looked perfect to me, but I held my breath waiting for Patricia's verdict. "These potatoes are quite salty," she announced after her first bite. "I can make fresh ones," I offered quickly. "Don't be ridiculous," Robert snapped. "We're not starting dinner over because of potatoes." Amy giggled drunkenly. "Remember when Claire forgot to put sugar in the apple pie that one year? Dad said it tasted like cardboard." "Amy," Thomas warned quietly, but she ignored him. "Or when she burned the green bean casserole so bad the smoke alarm went off," Amy continued, clearly enjoying herself. "The whole house smelled like burnt vegetables for days." I felt my face burning with shame. Every mistake I'd ever made was being paraded in front of everyone, like evidence in a trial. "That's enough," Jessica said firmly, surprising everyone. "Claire works incredibly hard to make these dinners special for all of us." Patricia's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" "I just think we should appreciate the effort," Jessica said, her voice softer now but still brave. "The effort?" Patricia's voice was ice cold. "When I was Claire's age, I managed a household of 5 children, cooked every meal from scratch, and never once served a dry turkey or salty potatoes. It's not about effort, dear. It's about competence." The silence that followed was deafening. I stared down at my untouched plate, fighting back tears. Robert said nothing to defend me. He never did when his mother attacked me. "Maybe we could talk about something else?" Thomas suggested weakly. "Like what?" Amy slurred. "How Claire can't even keep house properly. Did you see the dust on the mantel when we came in?" I hadn't noticed any dust. I'd cleaned that mantel 3 times yesterday. "Or how she quit her job to be a housewife but can't even do that right," Amy continued, clearly enjoying the attention. "Amy, stop," Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. "What? It's true? She doesn't work, doesn't have kids to chase around all day like Jessica does, and she still can't manage to cook a decent meal or keep a clean house." Maxwell had gone very still in his chair. I could see him watching everything, his small hands gripping his tablet tighter. His young face looked confused and sad, like he couldn't understand why everyone was being so mean to his mother. "I do my best," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Your best isn't very good, is it?" Patricia said with a cruel smile. That's when I made my first mistake of the evening. I reached for the gravy boat to refill Thomas's plate, trying to do something, anything, to be helpful. But my hands were shaking so badly from nerves and humiliation that I knocked over Patricia's wine glass instead. The red wine spread across the white tablecloth like blood, staining everything it touched. "Oh no," I gasped, jumping up to grab napkins. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "You clumsy fool," Patricia shrieked, pushing back from the table as wine dripped onto her expensive suit. "Look what you've done." "I'll clean it up right away," I said frantically, dabbing at the stain with my napkin. "You've ruined everything," Patricia continued, "the tablecloth, my dress, the entire dinner." Robert's face had gone dark with rage. I could see the storm building in his eyes, and I knew what was coming next. "I'll get some club soda," I said desperately, still dabbing at the spreading wine stain with my napkin. "It'll come right out, I promise." But Patricia wasn't listening. She stood up from her chair, wine dripping from her burgundy suit, her face twisted with fury. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't do anything right." "Mother, please," Robert said, but I could hear the anger building in his voice too, the anger that was always directed at me when his family was disappointed. "No, Robert," Patricia snapped. "I've held my tongue for 10 years watching this woman embarrass our family over and over again. She can't cook, she can't clean, she can't even serve wine without destroying everything." I felt tears starting to burn behind my eyes. "I'm sorry, Patricia. It was an accident. I'll pay for the dry cleaning. I'll replace the tablecloth." "Replace it?" Patricia laughed bitterly. "That tablecloth belonged to my grandmother. It's irreplaceable, just like my dress, just like this entire ruined evening." Amy was giggling again, clearly enjoying the drama. Thomas looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Jessica had gone pale, her nurse instincts probably telling her that something bad was about to happen. And Maxwell. My poor little boy was watching everything with wide, frightened eyes, his tablet clutched against his chest like a shield. I should have known better than to expect anything different, Patricia continued, her voice getting louder and more vicious. You've never been good enough for my son. You're clumsy, you're incompetent, That's enough, Robert suddenly roared, slamming his hand down on the table so hard the dishes jumped. For a moment, I thought he was defending me. For one hopeful second, I thought my husband was finally going to stand up for his wife. But when I looked at his face, I saw the truth. He wasn't angry at his mother. He was furious with me. Look what you've done, he shouted, his face red with rage. You've humiliated me in front of my entire family. Again. Robert, I didn't mean to. You never mean to. He cut me off, standing up from his chair. But you always do. Every single time my family comes over, you find some way to embarrass me. I backed away from the table, my heart pounding. I'd seen Robert angry before, but never like this. Never in front of everyone. You had one job today, Claire. One job. Make a nice dinner for my family. And you couldn't even do that without destroying everything. It was just an accident, I whispered, tears streaming down my face now. Just an accident? Robert's voice was getting louder, more dangerous. The dry turkey was an accident? The salty potatoes were an accident? The dust on the mantel was an accident? He was moving toward me now, and I could see something in his eyes that terrified me. Something I'd never seen before, not even during our worst fights. Robert, Thomas said quietly, maybe you should calm down. Calm down? Robert whirled around to face his brother. My wife just ruined Christmas dinner and humiliated our entire family, and you want me to calm down? She spilled some wine, Jessica said softly. It's not the end of the world. It's not just the wine, Robert screamed. It's everything. She's useless. She can't do anything right. That's when he grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my flesh like iron claws, squeezing so hard I gasped in pain. The grip was vicious, meant to hurt, meant to punish me for embarrassing him. You're hurting me, I whispered, trying to pull away. But Robert's grip only tightened. Good. Maybe pain will teach you to be more careful. The room went completely silent, except for my quiet sobs and Robert's harsh breathing. Everyone was staring at us in shock. Even Patricia looked horrified by what her son was doing. Thomas had gone very still, his police officer instincts probably screaming at him to intervene. Jessica's hand was covering her mouth. Amy had stopped giggling. And Maxwell, my brave little boy, was watching his father hurt his mother, his young face filled with a determination that seemed far beyond his 8 years. I could see the red marks forming on my arm where Robert's fingers pressed into my skin. Everyone could see them. There was no hiding this, no pretending it was anything other than what it was. Robert finally released me, and I stumbled backward, cradling my bruised arm against my chest. The silence that followed was deafening. The silence stretched on forever. I stood there cradling my throbbing arm, feeling the eyes of Robert's entire family on the purple bruises already blooming across my skin. The pain was sharp and immediate, but the humiliation cut even deeper. Robert was breathing hard, his face still flushed with anger, but I could see something else creeping into his expression now. Awareness. He was starting to realize what he'd just done in front of everyone. Patricia sat frozen in her wine-stained suit, her mouth slightly open. For the first time in 10 years, she seemed to have nothing critical to say. Thomas had gone completely rigid, his cop instincts warring with his family loyalty. Jessica was staring at my arm with professional concern, probably cataloging the severity of the bruises. Even Amy had sobered up enough to look shocked, but it was Maxwell who broke the terrible silence. My 8-year-old son stood up slowly from his chair, his small frame seeming impossibly brave in that moment. His tablet was clutched in both hands, and his dark eyes were fixed on his father with a steadiness that made my heart ache. I recorded everything, Dad. Those 5 simple words fell into the silence like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through the entire room. Robert's face went white. All the anger drained out of him in an instant. replaced by something I'd never seen before. Fear. Pure, cold fear. "What did you say?" Robert whispered, his voice barely audible. Maxwell held up his tablet, the screen glowing softly in the candlelight. "I said I recorded everything. Not just today. Everything." "Maxwell," Robert said carefully, like he was talking to a wild animal that might bolt. "What do you mean, everything?" My son's young voice was steady and clear. "All the times you hurt Mommy, all the times you yelled at her and made her cry, all the times you grabbed her arms and left marks. I recorded it all." The room erupted in shocked gasps. Patricia's hand flew to her chest. Thomas leaned forward in his chair, his police training taking over. Jessica was already moving toward me, her medical instincts kicking in. "You're lying," Robert said, but his voice was shaking now. "You're just a kid. You don't know how to—" "I'm not lying," Maxwell interrupted, something I'd never seen him do before. "I know how to use the camera on my tablet. I know how to save videos, and I know how to send them to people." Robert's face had gone from white to gray. "Send them to who?" Maxwell looked directly at his Uncle Thomas. "To police officers. I looked it up online. I know Uncle Thomas is a police officer, and I know that hurting people is against the law, even if they're your family." Thomas was staring at Maxwell with a mixture of pride and horror. "Maxwell, son, what exactly did you record?" "Everything," Maxwell repeated, his voice getting stronger. "Last week when Daddy grabbed Mommy's wrist so hard she cried. 2 weeks ago when he pushed her into the kitchen counter. Last month when he threw a plate at the wall and it broke into pieces that cut Mommy's foot." Each revelation hit the room like a physical blow. I watched Robert's carefully constructed world crumble with every word from our son's mouth. "And today," Maxwell continued, "when he grabbed Mommy's arm and hurt her in front of everyone. I recorded that too." Patricia was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she stared at her son. "Robert, is this true?" But Robert couldn't speak. He was staring at Maxwell's tablet like it was a bomb about to explode. "Show me," Thomas said quietly, standing up from his chair. His voice had changed completely, becoming the voice of a police officer, not a brother. Maxwell looked at me, and I saw the question in his eyes. He was asking for my permission, my brave little boy who had been protecting me in the only way he knew how. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Show him, sweetheart." Maxwell touched the screen of his tablet, and suddenly we could all hear my voice from last week, pleading with Robert to stop, begging him not to hurt me. The sound of my own pain and fear filled the dining room, making everything real in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. Robert sank into his chair like a deflated balloon, finally understanding that his son had just destroyed his life with 5 simple words and a tablet full of truth. The sound of my own voice pleading with Robert filled the dining room, each word a nail in the coffin of our marriage. "Please, Robert, you're hurting me. Please stop." The recording was crystal clear, capturing not just my pain but Robert's angry responses, his threats, his complete lack of remorse. Maxwell touched the screen again, and the sound stopped. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the shocked silence of people witnessing something unexpected. This was the heavy silence of truth finally being exposed. Robert sat slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. The powerful, controlling man who had terrorized me for years looked broken and small. "Maxwell," he whispered, "you don't understand. Sometimes adults have disagreements." "No," Maxwell said firmly, his young voice cutting through his father's excuses. "I understand perfectly. You hurt Mommy, you hurt her a lot, and hurting people is wrong." Thomas stood up slowly. His entire demeanor changed. He wasn't Robert's brother anymore. He was a police officer who had just witnessed evidence of domestic violence. "Robert, I need you to stay exactly where you are." "Thomas, please." Robert looked up with desperate eyes. "We can work this out as a family. There's no need to—" "There's every need," Thomas said coldly. "What I just heard on that recording is assault. What I witnessed tonight is assault. And according to Maxwell, there's a lot more where that came from." Patricia was sobbing openly now, her perfect composure completely shattered. I didn't know, she kept repeating. I didn't know he was hurting you, Claire. I thought you were just clumsy, just not good enough for him. I never imagined. Jessica had moved to my side and was gently examining my arm. These bruises are severe, she said quietly. And they're not the first ones, are they? I shook my head, unable to speak through my tears. How long? Jessica asked gently. Years, I whispered. It started small, just grabbing my arm when he was frustrated, but it got worse. Amy, who had been silent since Maxwell's revelation, suddenly spoke up. I knew something was wrong. The way you always apologized for everything, the way you jumped whenever Robert raised his voice. I knew, but I didn't want to see it. None of us wanted to see it, Thomas said grimly, pulling out his phone. But we can't unsee it now. What are you doing? Robert asked, panic creeping into his voice. My job, Thomas replied simply. I'm calling this in. You can't arrest your own brother. Watch me. Maxwell walked over to me and took my uninjured hand in his small one. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the recordings, Mommy. I wanted to protect you, but I didn't know how. I knelt down to his level, my heart breaking and healing at the same time. You did protect me, sweetheart. You were so brave. Braver than I was. I learned about domestic violence at school, Maxwell said seriously. Mrs. Henderson taught us that no one has the right to hurt us, not even family. She said if someone was hurting us, we should tell a trusted adult. So you told Uncle Thomas? I was going to. But then I thought maybe if I had proof, people would believe me faster. My 8-year-old son had understood something that had taken me years to figure out. He had found a way to make the invisible visible, to turn our private nightmare into undeniable evidence. The sound of sirens in the distance made Robert flinch. This will ruin everything, he said desperately. My business, my reputation, our family. You ruined our family, I said, finding my voice for the first time in years. You ruined it the first time you put your hands on me in anger. As the police cars pulled into our driveway, Patricia reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry, Claire. I'm so sorry for everything I said, everything I did to make this worse. I raised him to believe he could control everyone around him, and I'm sorry. The officers came through our front door, and Thomas met them in the hallway. I could hear him explaining the situation in his professional voice, laying out the evidence, the witnesses, the recordings. Robert was arrested at our Christmas dinner table, still wearing his festive red sweater. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked back at Maxwell and me one last time. This isn't over, he said. But Maxwell squeezed my hand and looked his father straight in the eye. Yes, it is. And for the first time in 10 years, I believed that maybe finally it really was over. The Christmas that was supposed to be perfect had become the day that set us free.